Hi everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à cette deuxième conférence de presse de la journée dans cette salle. We have with us Chrystia Freeland, Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Canada. We also have Tiff Macklem, Governor of the Bank of Canada. They will go with opening remarks and after we will take questions. Alors, c'est à vous.
OK, merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour faire une annonce sur le cadre de la politique monétaire du Canada, un sujet important au moment où notre pays continue sa relance après la récession liée à la COVID-19. Permettez-moi de commencer en soulignant que nous sommes en plein cœur d'une relance forte de la récession liée à la COVID-19. Le Canada a maintenant récupéré 106% des emplois qu'il avait perdus durant la pandémie, contre 83% pour les États-Unis. Les perspectives d'emploi pour certaines des personnes les plus vulnérables du Canada ayant subi les pires conséquences de la pandémie sur les emplois. Les femmes, les jeunes et les Canadiennes et les Canadiens racisés se sont grandement améliorés. Nous connaissons la deuxième plus forte reprise de l'emploi parmi les pays du G7. Le nombre de l'entreprise en activité a dépassé le niveau d'avant la pandémie et le taux de chômage s'établit actuellement à 6%, le taux le plus bas depuis le début de la pandémie et à seulement 0,3 points de pourcentage au-dessus des niveaux pré-pandémie du février 2020. Economists have predicted since the beginning of the pandemic that even a strong recovery was likely to encounter challenges. And global inflation has proven to be a significant challenge that countries around the world are facing. As global economies have unwound COVID-19 related restrictions and reopened their economies, the price of goods has gone up around the world. This is due to several factors. One is that during the pandemic, millions upon millions of people redirected the money they usually spent on in-person services towards physical, durable goods. This has put an extraordinary strain on global supply chains, leading to shortages and bottlenecks. This has been a significant driver of inflation around the world. Furthermore, droughts in key food-producing regions, including our own prairies, have caused grocery bills to go up. And energy prices have increased to rates not seen in decades. Economists expect these factors to dissipate over time. A strong monetary policy framework is the best weapon in our arsenal to keep prices stable and to keep inflationary pressures in check. Depuis que le Canada a adopté un régime de ciblage de l'inflation il y a 30 ans, l'inflation s'est maintenue en moyenne à près de 2%. Une inflation faible, stable et prévisible a contribué à la bonne performance du marché du travail, à la prospérité et à la croissance économique de notre pays. Le gouvernement fédéral et la Banque du Canada croient que la politique monétaire la plus susceptible d'aider les Canadiennes et les Canadiens consiste à rester axée sur des prix stables. Cette approche favorise un marché du travail solide et inclusif qui offre à chaque Canadien et Canadienne des opportunités de profiter d'une bonne qualité de vie. C'est pourquoi l'examen et le renouvellement du cadre de la politique monétaire du Canada tous les 5 ans constitue un moment si important. I'd like to thank the Bank of Canada and the Department of Finance for the thoroughness with which they have worked on this mandate renewal. Over the past 5 years, different options were considered, global best practices examined, experts consulted, and external input sought, including public consultations with Canadians. Which brings me to why we are here today. Today's announcement is about continuity. The Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada are today announcing that we will renew the 2% inflation target for another 5-year period. The target will continue to be the midpoint of the 1 to 3% inflation control range. Maintaining a stable environment for the prices Canadians pay is the paramount objective for Canada's monetary policy. That has been the case for the past 30 years, and that will remain the case for the next 5 years as well. In focusing on price stability, we also recognize that monetary policy should support maximum sustainable employment in Canada. When conditions warrant, the bank will use the flexibility of the framework to actively seek the maximum level of employment consistent with price stability, as it is already doing. This is not a change to the framework. Rather, it is a recognition of existing practice. Let me take this opportunity to commend the work and the track record of the Bank of Canada and of the Governor. The independence of institutions like the Bank of Canada matters. The bank has a well-earned reputation as one of Canada's most respected institutions and as one of the world's leading central banks. Ce professionnalisme, ces 3 décennies de succès et cette indépendance sont des piliers institutionnels importants de la prospérité et crédibilité internationale du Canada. I'd also like to thank all of the academics, experts, and commentators who contributed to the important public conversations and discussions we have been having about Canada's monetary policy framework. Today's renewal of Canada's monetary policy framework is fundamental to Canada's economic success. This is about continuity and about continuing to do what we know works. The renewed framework will keep the bank focused on delivering low, stable, and predictable inflation. This, in turn, will help keep life affordable for all Canadians. Thank you very much, and Governor, over to you.
Well, thank you, Minister Freeland, and good morning, everyone. I am very pleased to have this opportunity alongside you, Minister, to share with Canadians the renewed monetary policy framework agreed upon by the Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada. This framework lays out our shared objectives for Canada's monetary policy, while giving the bank the necessary operational independence to achieve these objectives. J'aimerais d'aborder rapidement les principes sur lesquels nous nous sommes entendus et qui vont orienter le travail de la Banque au cours des 5 prochaines années. Premièrement, le gouvernement et la Banque pensent que la meilleure contribution que la politique monétaire peut apporter au bien-être des Canadiens est de rester axée sur la stabilité des prix. Canadians value low, stable inflation. This came through loud and clear during our extensive consultations with Canadians in the lead-up to the renewal of this agreement. And I want to thank everybody who took the time to participate. Second, the government and the bank agree that monetary policy should continue to support maximum sustainable employment. That is the highest level of employment we can expect to achieve without seeing inflationary pressures. This is important because few things are more central to the economic and financial well-being of Canadians than having a job. It's also central to the price stability objective because keeping inflation on target over time requires an economy that is operating at maximum sustainable employment. Third, and notably, the government and the bank agree that well-anchored inflation expectations are critical to achieving both price stability and maximum sustainable employment. So the primary objective of monetary policy is to maintain low, stable inflation over time. Le régime de ciblage flexible de l'inflation que nous avons établi il y a 30 ans nous a été très utile. Il a permis de garder l'inflation à un niveau bas, stable et prévisible. D'ailleurs, depuis 1991, l'inflation mesurée par l'indice des prix à la consommation a été en moyenne très près de 2 %. Les Canadiens se sont habitués à ces résultats et s'attendent à ce que la banque atteigne la cible d'inflation. This has contributed to a more stable economic environment so that households and businesses can make spending and investment decisions with confidence. It has supported sustained growth in output, employment, and productivity, and it has improved Canadians' standard of living. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the value of a clear and well-understood inflation target. Our framework guided our policy response at the outset of this crisis, including our use of extraordinary liquidity operations and quantitative easing. It's also guided our decisions to taper and then end quantitative easing. And even as the complications of reopening the global economy have caused inflation in Canada and in many other countries to rise, medium and longer run inflation expectations in Canada remain well anchored on the 2% target. Keeping inflation expectations well anchored is key to completing the recovery and getting inflation back to target. As you can see, flexible inflation targeting has proven to be adaptable and resilient to changes in the economic landscape. This renewed agreement articulates how we will continue using the flexibility in our framework to address challenges confronting our economy. This includes using extended monetary policy tools when needed and actively seeking the maximum level of employment that is consistent with price stability when conditions warrant. As the agreement outlines, we are already considering a broader range of labor market indicators to assess full employment and the economy's potential output. This agreement provides continuity and clarity, and it strengthens our framework to manage the realities of the world we live in. This is the framework we need now as we confront elevated inflation and the challenges of reopening an economy, and it's what we need looking beyond the pandemic. Le ministre des Finances et moi sont d'accord que c'est le cadre qui convient pour la conduite de la politique monétaire au Canada. Je vais prononcer un discours dans quelques jours où je vais parler plus en détail de ces thèmes dont laissez-moi conclure et nous sommes prêts de répondre à vos questions.
Merci beaucoup. So we have a little bit more than 20 minutes of questions. We will start in the room, and if we have time, we'll go on the phones. Just to make it in an orderly fashion, I will call your names a little bit ahead of time, starting with the Globe and Mail, then we'll start with Greg, and after the Toronto Star.
Hi, Minister. Hi, Governor. Thank you so much. I understand there was no letter from the Bank of Canada to Finance laying out recommendations. I'm wondering why that is and whether there was disagreement between the bank and Department of Finance over the content of the renewed framework.
There is complete and very detailed and comprehensive agreement between the Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada on the framework that we are announcing today. This is the result of a very, very intensive process of analysis and consultation. And as the Governor and I both said, I would like to thank the officials at the bank and at the Department of Finance for the hard work they've done. The process has also included more extensive public consultation than during previous mandate renewals, and that's a really good thing. When it comes to the process between the Department of Finance and the bank, this is the result of extensive consultation, extensive discussion, including a number of really detailed conversations between me and the Governor. And I can say, speaking for the government, I feel absolutely confident that we have done our homework. We have been open-minded in terms of looking at the international experience. We've looked very carefully at Canada's track record. The governor and I have talked about the views of many different economists. We've talked about many different economic papers. We've talked about the experiences of central banks around the world. We've been thorough, and that's the right thing, because this is a decision that comes only once every 5 years, and it was important for us to feel we had been really exhaustive in our conversations and deliberations. Speaking for the Government of Canada, I can say I am very, very confident, very, very comfortable that we are announcing today the right decision for today and for the next 5 years. And I don't know if the governor would like to add anything.
I really don't have much to add other than the joint agreement really reflects our complete alignment on what we've agreed to. Last time there was no press conference. This time there's a press conference, and we're here to answer your questions in person.
Okay, thanks. Wanted to follow up on the fiscal update tomorrow, if you could provide a general sense of what to expect. I think economists, one of the things they're looking for is they think there's going to be billions in new fiscal room compared to the April budget. And they're wondering what percentage is going to go to actually showing a smaller deficit versus what percentage would go to new spending. So as finance minister, how do you handle that question?
The fiscal update is tomorrow. I'm here with the governor to talk about the Bank of Canada mandate renewal, and I will be happy to answer your questions about the fiscal update after it's been delivered tomorrow.
Greg Quinn, Market News International. Mr. Freeland, you said several times that this is about continuity. It's not a mandate change. Yet, looking at the one-page document, I see 6 references to maximum employment, references to climate change, references to economic inequality. These are things that are not always known as being within the power of central banks to control. And secondly, we've just gone through an election campaign where inflation was a top worry. So I wonder what you say to Canadians who would look at this and think this is a watering down of the mandate, and you are taking the ball off, your eye off the ball when it comes to inflation.
So what I would say is this absolutely is a confirmation and an affirmation of the mandate and of the paramount importance and the paramount value of having a central bank that has a mandate from the government to target inflation. The Bank of Canada has operated successfully with that inflation targeting framework for the past 30 years, and this mandate renewal is a recognition of that and a confirmation that we believe that approach is the right one for today and the right one for the next 5 years. In terms of employment, this mandate renewal is a recognition and a making explicit of what the bank has quite rightly already been doing. Maintaining maximum sustainable employment is critical to have sustainable, predictable, on-target inflation. That is an economic fact, and the bank has already, quite rightly, been taking that economic reality into account in its work and deliberations. We believe in transparency and in being open with Canadians about the important factors that are taken into account. And this mandate renewal, therefore, quite appropriately, represents a codification of existing practice. And perhaps the governor would like to comment.
Well, you put it very well, Minister. I would just underline, Greg, that this agreement really is about continuity and clarity. It's about clarity that price stability is our primary objective, clarity that the 2% target remains with a 1 to 3 band, and clarity that we are going to continue to use the flexibility that is built into our framework when conditions warrant. With respect to the situation right now, I do want to assure Canadians that we are focused on bringing inflation back to target in a way that doesn't choke off this recovery. This agreement, this mandate enables us to do just that.
Governor Macklem, I would like to get into that. There's a lot of worry about inflation expectations. There's data from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business showing wage expectations are the highest in at least a decade. Your own survey has shown a very high number of people who see inflation exceeding 3% for the next 2 years. So when it comes to using this flexibility to tackle maximum employment, how much flexibility do you really have when inflation is already quite high?
Well, let me be clear on something that the minister underlined. This is an agreement for 5 years, and with respect to this idea of actively seeking or probing for maximum sustainable employment, I want to underline, that's something you do when inflation's close to target, interest rates are at more normal levels. That's not the situation we're in right now. Right now, inflation is well above our target, and we're very focused on assessing the diminishing degree of excess supply in our economy and bringing inflation sustainably back to target. With respect to this idea, this idea of actively seeking or probing, as economists would say, for maximum sustainable, it's not a new idea. It's not new. And in fact, if you go back to where we were before the pandemic, in the couple of years before the pandemic, we did have inflation roughly on target. Interest rates were at more normal levels, and unemployment was hovering around 40-year lows. And in that period, we didn't see inflation moving up above the target, which I think we learned something from that. That's not the situation we're in now. Inflation's well above target. Interest rates are at the effective lower bound. But, as the minister highlighted, this is an agreement for 5 years. This is an agreement for all seasons, and we're being clear on sort of the range of tools that we have to manage a range of situations going forward.
We'll go to the Toronto Star after Reuters and after Bloomberg.
Hello, Heather Schofield from the Toronto Star. This is a question for both of you. In the last sentence of your press release, you talk about a joint responsibility in achieving the inflation target. And so I'm wondering what that looks like for the government of Canada. How do you actually go about controlling inflation in addition to what the central bank is already doing? And Governor, if you could just talk a little bit about how you hope to see the federal government act to control inflation.
So the work together on the mandate renewal is a very important moment, and it is probably the moment of the most intense collaboration between the government and the Bank of Canada. That's when we really talk about what should be the operating manual that the bank is given for the next 5 years. So this has been a time really of very extensive discussion about what are the tools in the toolbox that the bank needs. Between those 5-year renewals, as we all know, the bank has operational independence, and that is just foundational for the Canadian economy. I have noted, for example, in the confirmation of Canada's AAA credit rating, the extent to which ratings agencies have pointed to the institutional strength of Canada. And certainly the operational independence of the Bank of Canada is an important element of that institutional economic strength. And I emphasize that, Heather, just because it's really important at this moment when we've been talking and working together a lot to reaffirm for international markets and for Canadians that we fully respect the operational independence of the Bank of Canada, and We think if you look at the track record over the past 30 years, the bank has done a very good job. What do we mean when we say the bank and the government have a shared responsibility for the Canadian economy? We mean just that. Fiscal policy and monetary policy are two big levers when it comes to steering the Canadian economy. We've seen fiscal and monetary policy working together as this unprecedented global pandemic hit Canada. And fiscal and monetary policy are going to continue to need to work together as we get through this current stage of the economic recovery.
I'll just add, different countries have different traditions, and I think one of the really good traditions we have in Canada is that the monetary policy framework is a joint agreement of the government and the Bank of Canada. And why I think that's important is for two reasons. One, I think making it a joint agreement, agreeing on the objectives of monetary policy together, gives it democratic legitimacy. That's important for the legitimacy of the target. And then secondly, it gives the bank, as the minister just said, the operational independence to do what it takes to deliver on that mandate.
Okay, just to follow up, conversely, you talk frequently in the documents and in the press release about inclusion, and what beyond price stability? You've had price stability for, you keep saying over the last 30 years we've had price stability, and yet we don't have inclusion. So what can the central bank do beyond facilitating price stability to actually enhance inclusion?
Look, I think we could go on. We've got a nice lengthy background document that goes into that in more detail. But look, I would highlight two things. First of all, this agreement does highlight that the Bank of Canada has a role to play in supporting maximum sustainable employment, and that goes hand in hand with achieving our price stability objective. And the pandemic has really illustrated this. You can't summarize the labor market in one or two macro statistics. You need to look at you need to look across all parts of the labor market. And I think one of the things that we have learned over the last number of years is that a more inclusive economy is a bigger economy with more prosperity for all. As you've already seen, we have been considering a broader range of labor market indicators in trying to assess the overall health of the labor market. That's been helpful as we've assessed just how difficult the situation has been through the pandemic. It's also helpful as we come out of this pandemic and we see labor markets recovering and assessing what remaining degree of slack there is in the economy.
Good morning, Steve Shear, Reuters. So you've kept the inflation target as is, but you're adding language about the importance of maximum employment. And so I guess my question is, if each of you could explain how this is different from having a dual mandate, inflation and maximum employment. Is it just that inflation remains the overriding priority? I think there could be a little bit of confusion since it's very similar to what has been done in the United States until they tweaked their average inflation measure recently.
Well, thank you for the question, Steve. And I'm afraid I very much disagree with the premise you have just put forward. This is not a dual mandate. A dual mandate means seeking to optimize for two variables at once. We are very explicitly, with this mandate renewal, choosing not to do that. We are very clear in the mandate renewal that the paramount objective of the Bank of Canada is its inflation target of 2% within a 1% to 3% band. And I want to be extremely clear about that.
I'll just add, I think the key sentence in the joint agreement that answers that question. Further, the government and the bank agree that because well-anchored inflation expectations are critical to achieving both price stability and maximum sustainable employment, the primary objective of monetary policy is to maintain low, stable inflation over time.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up, would you, so the stress that we saw during the pandemic was the loss of more than 1 million jobs. And so more than 3 million jobs, but more than 1 million jobs until recently. And anyway, a big job loss. Is there a measure where you bring in, where you decide, that now we need to start talking, to talk about the jobs? Is it that kind of job loss? I mean, is there some sort of measure that you're going to be, because you mentioned this in the statement that there's a series of measures on employment that you're going to take into account. So I guess my question is, when is there enough stress to bring that consideration into the framework?
So I'll just quickly start, and I know the governor has some quite specific technical tools that he can talk about in this regard. But let me just start by being really clear that the Bank of Canada has already been looking carefully at employment as it does its job of achieving the inflation target. And it does that because it has to do that. You achieve the inflation target in part by being very careful and thoughtful about where the maximum sustainable level of employment is. So I really want to emphasize for people, and look back at speeches that the governor and his team have been giving, and you will very quickly see the extent to which employment has already been a consideration. But I think the governor has some more specific things to say.
Yeah, I'll just point you to, on our website, a few months ago, we put up a new dashboard that includes a broader set of labor market indicators. And really the point of that was to indicate, as I said before, is that you can't summarize the labor market in one or two macro statistics. So in this dashboard, there are sort of three broad types of information. There are these key macro statistics like the unemployment rate, like the employment rate. There are also some measures of the inclusiveness of labor market, how uneven or how common is the labor market experience across the economy. And then there are also various measures of various job characteristics like wages, like how many hours are people working. And the message is that we're looking at this as we come to the assessment of how much slack there is in the labor market. We're looking at this broad set of indicators. And that's been very useful through this pandemic. And that is going to be something, it is being useful as we come out of this pandemic. And we think it will continue to be useful post-pandemic.
Sorry, just before you start, Theo, we're going to go to Bloomberg, après TVA, and then Global News. And just a reminder to keep your questions and your answers short because we're starting to run out of time. So thanks.
Good morning, Theo Argyris, Bloomberg News. Because this renewal is taking place in a specific context, which is very elevated inflation, in fact, probably more elevated than any other time that a renewal has taken place, if I'm not mistaken. Can you just tell us, in the spirit of clarification, that given that inflation right now is where it is, does this mandate give you more scope to bring down inflation more slowly than you would have otherwise?
Okay, and I'll just quickly start by saying, as the governor said let me just start by saying, as the governor said in his remarks, we were mindful in the quite exhaustive work and deliberations we did on this mandate renewal, that we needed a mandate renewal, which is the right set of tools and the right target for today, and also the right set of tools and the right target for the next 5 years. We are very confident that we have put forward today something which suits the moment and suits the 5 years ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say, Theo, that, look, we have been using our framework throughout this crisis. At the beginning, remember, the concern was the economy plummeted, we're in deflation. The concern was deflation and depression. And we came in very boldly with monetary support. Fiscal policy came in very boldly. That put a floor under this crisis. That has supported this recovery. We've used our framework to adjust as this recovery has progressed. We began tapering our quantitative easing. We've ended quantitative easing. And the message today is we're going to continue to use this framework going forward as we pull out of this. And this agreement really, it reconfirms that our target is 2% inflation with a 1 to 3 band. And I want to assure Canadians that we are going to use our framework to get inflation back to target, because in looking at that, we are watching inflation expectations. We're looking at wage costs. We're assessing the amount of slack in the economy, and we're assessing what it will take to bring inflation sustainably back to target using this framework.
So help me understand that if the message here is continuity, and you're simply making what was implicit now explicit, why the change? Like, why make the implicit explicit when the implicit has been working all along? Why, if you can explain to us, why have you made this change today and not the previous 6 times that you've renewed the mandate?
Well, I can't speak to the last mandate renewal because I wasn't finance minister. But I can speak to this one. And I think transparency is a good thing. We have heard in how the bank itself has been talking about its decision-making process. We can see on the website with the dashboard that the governor just spoke about that looking at employment is already an important part of how the bank makes its decisions. And that makes sense. That is necessarily and appropriately so. And I think that it is highly appropriate to be clear and transparent and open about that with Canadians. So that's what we've done. I do also want to emphasize something, which is, having been a journalist, I know the temptation to think of every moment in the moment and in that snapshot. And I suppose politicians can be said to be likewise tempted. But I think we really have to think about this mandate renewal in terms of setting for the bank a framework and giving it tools for the next 5 years. And I think all of us have to be really humble about the high degree of uncertainty there is in the Canadian economy and the global economy today. Just think about what we've all been through in the past 21 months and the extent to which the most pressing issue of the day, and the issues have been very pressing, has changed, if not from day to day, then from week to week and from month to month. And that is entirely explicable, because this is a once-in-a-generation trauma, the deepest recession since the Great Depression. And then the world responded in a way we've never responded before. Rich countries decided to shut down the economy to fight a pandemic and to keep people alive. And now we're turning the global economy back on, and we're finding that it's pretty complicated. And so I think that our mindset needs to be to have some core principles which are clear, understandable, and agreed upon and make sense. And then to all be really ready to fly close to the ground, be very data-driven and driven by what is actually happening, and also respond with real agility to the fast-changing circumstances. Stephen Pelosi, I think, said some things along those lines over the weekend that I thought were really correct. And so I would just urge people to look at this mandate renewal and this framework as renewing and reasserting the tools which the Bank of Canada has in its very challenging job in a world where there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of volatility.
We're almost out of time. We can squeeze in maybe une question TVA. Est-ce que ce serait... Oh, okay.
I'll be very
Make it
brief. I'll
short,
just say,
please.
Theo,
Then we can squeeze
monetary policy works better when people understand it. And really, this agreement clarifies our objectives, and it clarifies how we have and can use the flexibility that is built into our framework.
Oui, on va peut-être se limiter une question TVA, and maybe just one question global, and then we'll have to wrap it up, guys. Thanks.
OK. Bonjour, Olivier Ferron-Boissy de TVA. J'aimerais juste savoir s'il y a une tentative d'échéancier ou d'objectif dans le temps pour atteindre cette cible d'inflation-là, puis au même niveau, l'usage des outils dont la banque dispose, c'est-à-dire notamment le taux directeur, on parlait d'avril peut-être pour une hausse. Est-ce qu'il y a un échéancier? Est-ce qu'il y a des objectifs, des cibles pour arriver à ce 2 %-là d'inflation?
On est très clair que c'est pour le gouvernement et la banque ensemble d'annoncer quelle est le cible du Banque du Canada, et on l'a fait aujourd'hui. Concernant le travail opérationnel, c'est le travail du Banque du Canada, et le Banque du Canada est indépendante. Alors, je vais laisser au gouverneur de répondre.
En termes de nos prévisions pour l'inflation, nous avons mis une prévision vers la fin d'octobre. Et qu'est-ce que vous verrez en cette prévision? C'est que l'inflation est élevée maintenant. On pense que ça va demeurer élevé durant la première moitié de l'année prochaine, et puis diminuer vers notre cible d'inflation dans la deuxième moitié de l'inflation. Bien sûr, il y a des risques autour de cette prévision, comme mon collègue Tony Gravel a soulevé jeudi passé. Les étranglements dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement posent un risque, s'ils sont plus persistants que prévu, ça pose un risque à la hausse à l'inflation. Et du fait que l'inflation est déjà en haut de nos cibles, nous sommes focalisés sur ces risques à la hausse. On regarde les données qui sortent maintenant et durant le reste de ce mois et janvier. Et vers la fin de janvier, on aura une nouvelle prévision avec une nouvelle prévision pour l'inflation et l'activité économique et les risques autour de cette prévision.
I just have a quick question for the Deputy Prime Minister. Was the impact on the housing market, which turned red hot during the pandemic, a big part of your considerations? Because what's happened on the housing market is said to be a big driver of wealth inequality in Canada.
We truly had what I would describe as a pretty exhaustive discussion between the government and the Bank of Canada. You are aware, and the bank's document goes into in some detail the very careful and inclusive process that the bank led in looking at this mandate renewal. In looking at it, we looked at I would say all of the different leading models that other banks around the world use, and the Bank of Canada's own horse race did that. And we looked at different ideas that academic economists have put forward. And we also looked at the data and the economic situation in Canada. And certainly house prices are an important data point.
I'll just add that this review was the most comprehensive we've done in the 30 years that we've had inflation targeting. And after 30 years, it was time to really consider the full range of alternatives. It was also time to listen to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. You know, this background document goes into a lot more detail, but what really struck me in that exercise was really how the message from experts, the message from Canadians was very similar. Canadians don't like inflation. Inflation stretches their ability to cover their bills. They like low, stable, and predictable inflation. And the analysis of the alternatives, and we considered average inflation targeting, price level targeting, nominal GDP growth and level targeting, dual mandate, and flexible inflation targeting. And what came out of that is it's very hard to beat flexible inflation targeting. It has served us very well. Historically, in the simulations, it performs very well. And that is really reflected in the agreement today.
Okay. Thank you very much. This ends the press conference. Thank you for staying a little bit longer than expected. So have a great day. Thanks.